A galleon was a large, multi-decked sailing ship used primarily by European states from the 16th to 18th centuries. Etymology. The term galleon, large ship, comes from Old French galleon, little ship, from Spanish galleon, armed merchant ship, from Portuguese galeo, warship, from Byzantine Greek galeia, galley, plus augmentative suffix on. Another possible origin is the Old French word gallia meaning galley. The term was originally given to certain types of war galleys in the Middle Ages. The Annales Genovese mentions galleons of 80, 64 and 60 oars, used for battle and on missions of exploration, in the 12th and 13th centuries. It is very likely that the galleons and galleots mentioned in the accounts of the Crusades were the same vessels. Later, when the term started to be applied to sail-only vessels, it meant, like the English term, man of war, a warship that was otherwise no different from the other sailing ships of the time. History. Documentary sources point to a new type of sailing ship built in early 16th century Venice. It was called galleon and used by the Venetians against pirates. By the second half of the century, galleons were already seen along the Mediterranean. A lowering of the forecastle and elongation of the hull gave galleons an unprecedented level of stability in the water, and reduced wind resistance at the front, leading to a faster, more maneuverable vessel. The galleon differed from the older types primarily by being longer, lower and narrower, with a square tuck stern instead of a round tuck, and by having a snout or head projecting forward from the bows below the level of the forecastle. In Portugal at least, carracks were usually very large ships for their time, while galleons were mostly under 500 tons, although the Manila galleons were to reach up to 2,000 tons. With the introduction of the galleon in Portuguese India armadas during the first quarter of the 16th century, carracks gradually began to be less armed and became almost exclusively cargo ships, leaving any fighting to be done to the galleons. One of the largest and most famous of Portuguese galleons was the São João Baptista, a 1,000-ton galleon built in 1534, said to have carried 366 guns. Carracks also tended to be lightly armed and used for transporting cargo in all the fleets of other Western European states, while galleons were purpose-built warships, and were stronger, more heavily armed, and also cheaper to build and were therefore a much better investment for use as warships or transports. There are disputes about its origins and development, but each Atlantic sea power built types suited to its needs, while constantly learning from their rivals. It was the captains of the Spanish Navy, Pedro Menéndez de Avilés and Álvaro de Bazan, who designed the definitive long and relatively narrow-hulled galleon for Spain in the 1550s. The galleon was powered entirely by wind, using sails carried on 3 or 4 masts, with a lateen sail continuing to be used on the last masts. They were used in both military and trade applications, most famously in the Spanish treasure fleet, and the Manila galleons. While carracks played the leading role in early global explorations, galleons also played a part in the 16th and 17th centuries. In fact, galleons were so versatile that a single vessel may have been refitted for wartime and peacetime roles several times during its lifespan. The galleon was the prototype of all square-rigged ships with 3 or more masts for over 2.5 centuries, including the later full-rigged ship. The principal warships of the opposing English and Spanish fleets in the 1588 confrontation of the Spanish Armada were galleons, with the modified English, race-built galleons developed by John Hawkins proving decisive, while the capacious Spanish galleons, designed primarily as transports, showed great endurance in the battles and in the great storms on the voyage home. Most survived the ordeal. Construction. Galleons were constructed from oak, pine and various hardwoods for hull and decking. Hulls were usually carvel-built. The expenses involved in galleon construction were enormous. Hundreds of expert tradesmen worked day and night for months before a galleon was seaworthy. To cover the expense, galleons were often funded by groups of wealthy businessmen who pooled resources for a new ship. Therefore, most galleons were originally consigned for trade, although those captured by rival states were usually put into military service. The most common gun used aboard a galleon was the demi-culverin, although gun sizes up to demi-cannon were possible. Because of the long periods often spent at sea and poor conditions on board, many of the crew often perished during the voyage. Therefore, advanced rigging systems were developed so that the vessel could be sailed home by an active sailing crew a fraction of the size aboard at departure. Distinguishing features. The most distinguishing features of the galleon include the long beak, the lateen-rigged mizzenmasts, and the square gallery at the stern off the captain's cabin. In larger galleons, a fourth mast was added, usually a lateen-rigged mizzen, called the Bonaventure mizzen. The galleon continued to be used into the 18th century, by which time purpose-built vessels such as the flout, the brig and the full-rigged ship, both as a trading vessel and ship of the line, rendered it obsolete for trade and warfare respectively. The oldest English drawings. The oldest known scale drawings in England are in a manuscript called Fragments of Ancient Shipwrightry, made in about 1586 by Matthew Baker, a master shipwright. This manuscript, held at the Pepys Library, Magdalen College, Cambridge, provides an authentic reference for the size and shape of typical English galleons built during this period. Based on these plans, the Science Museum, London has built a 1/48 scale model ship that is an exemplar of galleons of this era. Notable galleons: São João Baptista, nicknamed Botafogo, the most powerful warship when launched by the Portuguese, became famous during the conquest of Tunis, where it was commanded by Infante Louis, Duke of Bejar. Adler von Lübeck, the largest ship of its day when launched in 1566. The Manila galleons, Spanish trading ships that sailed once or twice per year across the Pacific Ocean between Manila in the Philippines and Acapulco in New Spain. San Salvador, flagship vessel in the João Rodrigues Cabrillo's 1542 exploration of present-day California in the United States. San Pelayo, the large 906-ton galleon which served as the flagship of Pedro Menéndez de Avilés during his expedition to establish St. Augustine, Florida in 1565. Ironically, the vessel was so large it could not enter St. Augustine's harbor, so Menéndez ordered it offloaded and sent it back to Hispaniola. At a later date, her crew mutinied and sailed to Europe, where the ship wrecked off the coast of Denmark. Golden Hind, the ship in which Sir Francis Drake circumnavigated the globe 1577 to 1580. Ark Raleigh, the ship was designed and built by Sir Walter Raleigh. It was later chosen by Lord Howard, Admiral of the Fleet, to be the flagship of the English fleet in the fight against the Spanish Armada in 1588 and was summarily renamed the Ark Royal Revenge, a galleon built in 1577, the flagship of Sir Francis Drake in the Battle of the Spanish Armada in 1588. Was captured by a Spanish fleet off Flores in the Azores in 1591 and sank while being sailed back to Spain. São Martinho, the Portuguese galleon, the flagship of Duke of Medina Sidonia, commander-in-chief of the Spanish Armada. Triumph, the largest Elizabethan galleon, flagship of Sir Martin Frobisher in the Battle of the Spanish Armada. San Juan Bautista. She crossed the Pacific Ocean from Japan to New Spain in 1614. She was of the Spanish galleon type, known in Japan as Nunbunsen. Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, a Spanish galleon, known to its crew as Cacafuego for its strong cannon. It was captured by Sir Francis Drake in 1578 and all its treasures were brought to England. It was holding treasures mined in 1 year by the Spanish in the Americas. Padre Eterno, a Portuguese galleon launched in 1663. It was considered to be the biggest ship of its time, carrying 144 pieces of artillery and able to carry up to 2,000 t of cargo. Vasa, the only original galleon to be preserved. It sank in 1628 and was raised in 1961 for preservation as a museum ship. In literature, the galleon or gold galleon is also used as a currency in the Harry Potter series by J.K.